The sun reflected off the water, making it look like liquid silver, and for a moment, I thought I could breathe. Then Sabrina's whisper cut across my ear, icy and deliberate. "Say hello to the liver, Helen." Before I could react, her hands pushed me. My hips protested, my balance gone. And then the cold hit like a hammer. The river swallowed me whole. Panic clawed at my lungs. I kicked, gasping, seeing Michael's face frozen on the deck. No horror. Just the faintest smile. He didn't hesitate, didn't move. I realized in that moment this wasn't an accident. My own son wanted me dead. The current yanked at me. Relentless. My dress clung to my body, heavy and wet, as my hip throbbed from the recent surgery. I tried to scream, but my voice was snatched by the river. The boat moved away, Michael and Sabrina's laughter or relief echoing faintly across the water. Cold burned my chest, but terror sharpened my thoughts. I couldn't die. Not like this. Not when betrayal tasted so sharp. I kicked harder, felt the river's pull beneath my skin, and for a heartbeat I almost gave in. Then a glimmer. A rusty trawler appeared around the bend, its wake shimmering in the early sunlight. A man leaned over the railing. "Hold on, lady," his voice carried. Two strong arms pulled me from the water, coughing, shaking, but alive. Wrapped in a wool blanket smelling of salt and smoke, I tried to explain. "You don't understand, it's my family. They tried to kill me." He studied me, gray eyes piercing. "Sometimes the right thing in what the law says." "Fine. You stay quiet. But tell me everything." I remembered the morning, Michael's call, his warm voice, the way he insisted we spend time together. The yacht gleaming. The promise of family I wanted to believe in. I remembered the hug, all show, Sabrina's sharp smile, the sparkling river. I remembered the push, the sudden plunge, the betrayal. And I remembered survival, shivering, gasping, but alive. That survival became the core of my plan. They thought they'd buried me. They thought the world would mourn my death and accept Michael and Sabrina as the rightful heirs. They had no idea I had seen everything. 4 days later, I watched my own funeral from beneath a black veil. Chairs filled with mourners, genuine grief mingling with opportunistic sorrow. Michael and Sabrina stood center stage, perfect, elegant, the picture of loss. I bit the inside of my cheek, tasting iron. The papers, the reporters, the stories. They painted me senile, confused, a danger to myself. The empire, my fortune, the house, all theirs now in the eyes of the world. But beneath the veneer I was alive, sharpening my mind, planning my return. That night, I made the decision. I would reclaim everything. Frank drove me to the Marshall home. Silent streets of Princeton stretching before us. 35 years of life and memory condensed into walls now held by my son and his wife. I slid the old brass key into the back door. It turned easily. Michael had never asked for it back. They thought they'd erased me. The smell hit me first, new, artificial, masking the life within. I moved through the home slowly, flashlight in hand, each shadow a reminder of what was mine and stolen. Upstairs, Thomas's old study revealed the depth of their deception. A folder marked Project Helen. Medical reports, forged signatures, notes on cognitive decline. Staged forgetfulness, manipulated mishaps. Every moment of supposed weakness, orchestrated. They hadn't just tried to take my fortune, they had rewritten my life. I snapped photos with the disposable camera Frank had supplied, my hands trembling. The betrayal cut deeper than the river ever could. Then a cry, a baby, soft, fragile, unmistakable. I froze. Michael and Sabrina had no children. Whose baby was this? The nursery pastel clouds, white crepe toys lined neatly. My knees almost gave way. A newborn, no more than a few weeks old, crying for a world he hadn't chosen. I stepped closer, stopped as headlights swept across the window. Michael and Sabrina had returned. I darted down, slipping into the garden, lungs burning, heart pounding, disposable camera clutched tight. Frank pulled up moments later, engine rumbling. "A baby?" I gasped. He understood immediately. That's not just greed anymore. That's darker, and he was right. It wasn't only about me anymore, it was about an innocent life trapped in their greed. Morning came with Vera Kane, sharp-eyed, methodical. The private investigator sifted through records, unearthed connections. Surrogacy clinic, young mother, death during delivery. Anna Rivera, 17, gone, her child hidden. My son and his wife, pawns in a game far larger than their ambition. Laura Tress, Claudia Mercer, the shadow behind the network. Polished, efficient. Deadly, families manipulated, deaths expedited, estates stolen. The photos chilled me. Mercer and clinics, shaking hands, overseeing deliveries, always one step removed. Michael had delivered me into her hands without knowing it. Her web spanned years, dozens of victims, a system of legalized murder, and the baby, Anna's child, was caught in the center. The plan crystallized. I would confront them in my house, draw Mercer out, capture evidence. Frank would position nearby, federal agents ready. Hidden recorders would expose every word. When the sun dipped below the horizon, I stepped through the front door just before dusk. Thomas's old armchair, my anchor in a storm of fear and rage. The door opened. Michael froze, keys slipping from his hand. "Hello, darling," I said evenly, voice calm despite trembling. "Did you miss me?" Sabrina screamed, raw, piercing. Claudia Mercer entered. Elegant, cold. "The woman who refuses to die," she said, scanning me as though I were nothing more than a nuisance. Her words dripped confidence, but I had waited for this moment. "You've murdered people," I said low, deliberate. "Dozens, and tonight the world will hear you say it." The recorders blinked red, then chaos. Agents swarmed, boots on hardwood, handcuffs snapping. Mercer bolted, skidded 6 feet before 3 agents slammed her down. Michael and Sabrina frozen. Masks stripped away. Rights read, realization dawning. Legal reckoning, justice for the murdered, the manipulated, the stolen lives. Mercer convicted. Life without parole. Michael and Sabrina, decades removed from what they had stolen. And Anna's child, my heart, the life that mattered most, placed finally in my arms under the law. Samuel Rivera Marshall, a legacy of survival, love, and choice. Now 5 years later, Samuel laughs in the sunlight, curious and trusting. He knows truth. He knows the danger, the betrayal, the love that chose him. Sometimes when I tuck him in, I recall the river, the betrayal, the cold, the push. But I look at him safe, smiling, and I know why I survived. Family isn't blood, it's choice. It's protection, it's love that outlasts greed, deceit, and death. That night, I stayed at Frank's small riverside cabin. The woods smelled of smoke and old salt water, familiar and grounding. I sat by the window. Samuel swaddled against my chest, eyes wide and blinking in the dim light. Every now and then, he reached up with tiny hands, grasping my shirt or my hair, and I felt an almost sacred bond forming. He had survived because I had survived, and I would protect him with every ounce of strength left in me. Frank paced. "You can't just sit here forever," he said, voice low. "They'll start asking questions if you disappear for too long." "Mercer moves fast." I nodded, already thinking through the options. I had to bait them, lure them into a trap, and I had to do it without putting Samuel at risk. "Tomorrow, we start with Laura," I said. "We need to find every piece of dirt on them, everything they've touched since Thomas died. And we need to confirm Samuel's safety legally before anyone even thinks they can interfere." Frank's eyes narrowed. "You're not thinking about going back in the house, are you?" I hesitated. My hands tightened on Samuel. "I have to. It's the only way to draw Mercer out. Only way to expose her and make sure they never touch him." By morning, Laura had assembled a dossier that looked like it could sink a small army. Property records, financial statements, phone logs, emails, medical reports, evidence of deception, manipulation, bribery, and worse. Michael and Sabrina were puppets. But Mercer was the puppeteer, and she had tangled herself with every step. There were gaps, loopholes, but the pattern was clear. Death, coercion, and inheritance. Always inheritance. Samuel's existence complicated things, but it also gave me leverage. I could not only expose them but also protect the only living link to the girl who had been stolen from life. Frank drove us back to the Princeton house that night. Samuel asleep in his car seat, I felt his small weight pressing into me like a reminder of purpose. The street was quiet, darkened by shadows of overgrown oaks. I slipped through the back garden gate, flashlight in hand, heart hammering. The front of the house was lit softly from the porch lights, casting long reflections onto the freshly waxed floors I remembered so well. Inside, the air was warm, artificial, scented of money and ambition, not home. I moved quickly, methodical, heart pounding, to Thomas's old study. Hidden cameras had already been installed by Laura, recorders ready. I set them carefully, checking angles and positions, making sure nothing would be missed. Every door, every hallway, every possible hiding spot covered. I placed Samuel's bassinet strategically near the stairwell, just outside the study, so he would remain out of sight but within earshot. The plan was simple. Mercer would come, and when she spoke, every word would be captured. Michael and Sabrina would follow, too predictable in their greed. And finally, I would have the truth, the proof that would bring them down. I waited, muscles coiled like springs. Minutes passed, then the soft click of the front door. The keys turned. Their voices drifted through the hallway, casual, unaware. "Mom," Michael called, tentative. "I fought you." I stepped into the study, eyes cold, voice calm. "Did you miss me?" The shock on their faces was exquisite. Sabrina gasped, covering her mouth. "Helen," Michael stammered. Claudia Mercer followed moments later, entering with perfect timing, as if she owned the world. "The woman who refuses to die," she said, lips thin, smile cruel. "This is unwise." I folded my hands. "Is it unwise to expose murder?" I asked. Silent tension thickened. Then Frank's team moved in. Agents swarmed. Commands shouted, boots heavy on polished floors. Mercer bolted for the kitchen, sliding across the hardwood, but 3 agents met her, pinning her to the ground. Leather portfolio scattering. Michael and Sabrina froze, realization dawning, faces drained of color. My son, trembling, whispered, "Mom, I didn't respond." The law was speaking now, and justice was finally unchained. Mercer was led away, her network unraveling, decades of calculated crime collapsing. Michael and Sabrina's greed had caught up with them. Plea deals, prison sentences, and restitution. Empty gestures compared to the trust they had broken. Samuel remained in my arms. Dark eyes blinking up at me, a trust so fragile it felt sacred. I whispered to him stories of his mother, Anna Rivera, the courage she had shown, the life she had given. And I told him, in the simplest way a child could understand, that we would always protect each other. That day, the Marshall Empire was no longer a battleground of greed, it was a sanctuary. I had survived betrayal, water, and lies. I had survived my own family's ambition, and I would survive anything to keep Samuel safe. Days turned into weeks. Lawyers finalized the estate, untangling the mess Mercer had created. Michael and Sabrina were stripped of wealth and power, their lies and crimes exposed. I secured legal guardianship for Samuel, ensuring his inheritance and his protection. I began rebuilding the house, not as a monument to loss, but as a home. A safe place for a child whose beginning had been stolen from him. Each room, each corner, infused with care and memory, whispered of protection, love, and choice. And as I watched Samuel play in the sunlit garden, laughter spilling over like music, I understood something profound. Family is not merely those who share your name. Family is those who choose you, who stand beside you when the current rises, who protect you when the world turns cold. Blood does not make love, action does. Courage does, trust does, and I finally had found my family again, not in Michael and not in Sabrina, not in what had been stolen, but in this small, bright, living reminder that survival, justice, and love could coexist. Weeks passed like a slow tide, dragging memories along with them. Samuel slept in his crib. Tiny fingers curled around the edges, a quiet reminder of what I had fought for. Each morning I woke with the same sharp awareness, the world was still dangerous, but this, him, made everything worth it. I pored over the files Laura had compiled, reading every report, every forged signature, every manipulated record. Each one was a scar left by my own family, a reminder of how carefully they had tried to erase me. But scars also reminded me I was alive, and alive meant I could protect Samuel. Frank visited every evening, bringing news and advice. He never wavered in his blunt practicality. "You can't let your guard down, Helen. Mercer's gone, but her network, there are always loose ends." I nodded, rocking Samuel gently. "I know, but I also can't live in fear forever. He needs normal. I need normal." His eyes softened. "Normal will come, but not overnight. You need patience. More than revenge ever demanded." I let him speak, listening to the words I already knew. Revenge was done. Survival was ongoing. Samuel's safety was the mission now. Michael was in prison, stripped of everything, his arrogance replaced with desperation. He had begged through lawyers to see Samuel, claiming regret, innocence, and a desire to make amends. Each letter arrived carefully censored, polite, measured, but I burned the first several. One day, Laura advised we could manage supervised visits if necessary. But the priority was Samuel's emotional safety. I didn't want a man who tried to kill me in his child's life, not yet, not ever. And Sabrina. She was bitter, angry, clinging to fantasies of power lost. Bitterness dripping from every legal filing she submitted. But they were both powerless now, shadows of the family I had known. At home, we rebuilt slowly. Each room a statement, a choice. Samuel's nursery became a sanctuary, walls painted in warm pastels, sunlight streaming in through carefully cleaned windows. Toys lined the shelves, but nothing extravagant. Books, soft blankets, a small wooden mobile that spun lazily over the crib. I watched him learn to sit, to grasp objects, to babble in the mornings. Each milestone was victory, each giggle a defiance against the world that had tried to erase him, to erase me. One afternoon, Frank brought news that a reporter had tried to dig into Mercer's prior cases. Some of her clients' families are starting to ask questions, he said, sipping his coffee. They're realizing things didn't add up. I nodded. God, let them see the truth. Let them know I survived. That justice was served. Samuel cooed in my arms, reaching for the cup with tiny fingers, and I smiled despite the weight of what had happened. Life continued. Life thrived. Laura worked with relentless precision, tracking every loose thread from Mercer's network. Lawyers, brokers, probate judges, anyone who had assisted in her schemes, papers were filed, evidence collected. By the time Samuel turned 1, Mercer's influence had been nearly entirely dismantled. The Marshall Empire was secure once more, not for greed or wealth, but for stability, for the life of the child who had been stolen and hidden. One quiet evening, I sat with Samuel on the back porch. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, the air heavy with warmth and the scent of blooming flowers. Samuel laughed as I tickled his tiny feet, a sound so pure it seemed impossible after everything we had endured. I thought of Thomas, of the life we had built, of the betrayal, and then of Samuel, the living proof that love and courage endure. My hand brushed over his soft hair, and I whispered, "You are safe, my little one, always." Months turned to years. Samuel grew, learning words, understanding simple concepts, and beginning to explore the world with cautious curiosity. I taught him stories of bravery, of Ana Rivera's courage, of the dangers that lurk when greed blinds people. He learned that family is more than blood, that protection and love define it. He asked questions, sometimes small, serious questions for a child, and I answered truthfully but gently. Every explanation was a lesson in morality, resilience, and hope. Through it all, I rebuilt relationships with those who had genuinely cared. Mrs. Dalton, my neighbor, visited often, baking small treats and telling stories of the neighborhood. Old friends from church came by, bringing warmth and laughter, proving that not everyone had turned away. Even Frank became more than a protector, he became family, his gruff exterior hiding decades of experience, loyalty, and heart. Laura remained professional but also personally invested, celebrating Samuel's first steps, first words, small victories alongside me. Legal matters were final by Samuel's 3rd birthday. Custody was permanent, estate fully secured, Mercer's network dismantled. Michael and Sabrina serving their sentences. There were still moments of fear, brief flashes of memory from the river, from the betrayal, from the sheer horror of what could have been, but Samuel's laughter, his trust, and his life reminded me daily of why I survived. Every hug, every smile was an affirmation survival had meaning, and justice had consequences. On Samuel's 5th birthday, I watched him blow out candles on a small cake, surrounded by friends and family who had earned their place in our lives. I held him close, whispering, "You are loved, Samuel, by people who chose you." He looked up at me, eyes shining, and said simply, "I know, Mommy." That moment crystallized everything: the river, the betrayal, the survival, the justice, the love. It was more than a story of wealth, of murder, of manipulation. It was a story of choices, courage, and the strength to protect those we love, even against the ones who claim to be family. And as I tucked him into bed that night, tracing the soft curve of his cheek, I whispered a final truth, one that had become my guiding principle: family isn't defined by blood. Family is defined by love, by protection, by trust. And I, Helen Marshall, had chosen mine. I had survived the river, the lies, the betrayal, and I had claimed what truly mattered: Samuel's life, and the chance to build something unbreakable. and in that choice, I found peace. Even after the courtroom victories, there were shadows that lingered. Small things at first, letters from unknown couriers, strange cars parked outside the driveway, phone calls that ended when I picked up. Mercer was gone, but her network had been vast, meticulous, and persistent. Frank insisted on daily checks, Laura on continuous surveillance. Every day I reminded myself, vigilance is protection, not paranoia. Samuel's life depended on it, and I had no intention of letting anyone harm him, not after all we had survived. Samuel began speaking in full sentences around his third year. His curiosity was endless, questions pouring like water over rocks. "Mommy, why did some people want you gone?" he asked one evening as we walked through the garden, his small hand wrapped around mine. I paused, choosing my words carefully. "Some people let greed take over their hearts, Samuel. They forgot what love means." He frowned, looking down at the flowers. "But you're safe now, right?" I smiled, brushing his hair back. "Yes, my love. Always. No one can hurt us again." His trust was my shield, his presence my anchor, and every time I saw him laugh, I knew survival had meaning beyond revenge or wealth. One night, Laura brought urgent news. "Helen, I found something you need to see." We sat at her kitchen table. Papers spread across the surface. Photos, emails, and legal filings showed that Mercer had one last associate, an estate lawyer who had been quietly moving assets overseas. They hadn't counted on me surviving. They hadn't counted on Laura. "We can stop him before he does anything else," Laura said. I nodded, a cold fire building in me. "We finished this completely, no loose ends." By dawn, Frank had arranged surveillance, coordinated with federal agents. We moved fast, precise, leaving nothing to chance. When the associate arrived at his office, expecting routine work, he walked straight into an FBI sting. Arrests made, assets frozen, and the last of Mercer's influence crumbled into dust. Back at the house, life slowly normalized. I watched Samuel explore the garden, his small feet leaving prints in the wet grass, sunlight bouncing off his hair. He discovered bugs, flowers, and hidden corners with a delight that reminded me that innocence was a fragile treasure worth protecting. I made sure he knew the story of Anna Rivera, the brave girl who had given him life. She was small and brave, I told him one evening, and she made sure you could live and be happy. He nodded seriously, eyes wide. "I want to be brave too, Mommy." I kissed the top of his head. "You already are, Samo, you already are." By the time he turned 4, reporters occasionally asked for interviews. I refused most, choosing to keep our life private, safe, and free from exploitation. But occasionally, I allowed small stories to remind the public of the truth, that greed had consequences, that justice could prevail, and that survival was possible even when betrayal came from the closest people. Michael and Sabrina's names surfaced only in legal documents, their punishment a cautionary tale. Samuel remained untouched by media glare, shielded by layers of protection and love. One crisp autumn evening, Frank and I sat on the porch, Samuel asleep inside. The leaves fell in gold and crimson around the garden, swirling in the wind like little reminders of change. "You've done more than survive, Helen," Frank said softly. "You've rebuilt everything." I stared into the fading light. "Survive, yes, but rebuild, that's for him. For Samuel. Everything else is just noise." Frank nodded. "He's lucky to have you. The world is a better place because of what you did." Samuel's 5th birthday came quietly but joyfully. No extravagance, only warmth, friends, and genuine smiles. He had learned to speak clearly, walk confidently, and show affection without hesitation. Watching him blow out the candles, his small hands cupped over the flame, I felt the full weight of everything that had happened: the river, the betrayal, the fake funeral, the stolen baby, the criminal empire dismantled. And I realized something profound: survival had never been about revenge alone. It had been about creating a life where Samuel could thrive, unafraid and unbound by the greed and cruelty that had nearly destroyed us. Months later, as I tucked him into bed, Samuel rested his small head against my shoulder. "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to help people like you," he whispered. I kissed his forehead, warmth spreading through me. "You already do, my love. Every day you choose kindness, courage, and love, you're already helping." He smiled in his sleep, peaceful, unaware of the dangers that had surrounded him. Unaware of the river that had nearly claimed me. unaware of the son and daughter-in-law who had tried to take everything from me. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to breathe fully, deeply, without fear. The years passed. Samuel grew taller, stronger, wiser in ways that made me proud and sometimes ache with nostalgia. He asked questions about his heritage, about Thomas, about Anna Rivera. Each story I told carefully, truth laced with love, courage, and respect. The house, once a monument to betrayal, became a home, a sanctuary for learning, laughter, and life. Gardens flourished where deception had once loomed. Rooms echoed with joy instead of silence. The river, once a symbol of danger and betrayal, now shimmered peacefully in memory only, a reminder of the darkness overcome, the strength discovered, and the love that endured. And when Samuel ran through the garden, chasing shadows, laughing at the wind, I realized the ultimate truth: family is not what you are born into. Family is what you choose, what you protect, what you nurture with every act of courage and love. I had survived betrayal, survived murder, survived greed. But most importantly, I had survived to create something that mattered. Samuel's life was proof that even in the coldest, darkest currents, warmth and trust could prevail. And I knew as I watched him smile, as he ran free, that the inheritance that truly mattered was not wealth, not power, not revenge. It was love, protection, and the choices that define a life worth living. Years had passed since that icy river, since the betrayal that had nearly ended me. Yet the memories never fully faded. Some nights, when the wind rustled through the trees, or the moonlight spilled across Samuel's bedroom floor, I would remember Michael's blank smile, Sabrina's sharp eyes, and the cruel precision with which they tried to erase me. But those memories no longer brought fear, they brought clarity. Survival had given me purpose, and purpose had given me peace. Samuel had grown into a lively, inquisitive boy. His laughter filled the house, bouncing off walls that had once been silent with tension. He asked questions about everything: the flowers in the garden, the birds that nested in the oaks, the stories of brave people like Anna Rivera, his birth mother. Each question was an opportunity to teach him courage, honesty, and compassion. I told him stories not to frighten him, but to instill a sense of the world's complexity, goodness and danger coexisting, and to show him how to choose kindness and bravery every single day. One afternoon, while Samuel built a makeshift fort from cushions and blankets, I watched from the doorway. He paused, looking up at me with wide, earnest eyes. "Mommy, would the bad people ever come back?" His small voice trembled, but he tried to be brave. I walked over, crouched beside him, and held his shoulders. "No, my love, they're gone. They can't touch us anymore. But it's good to be careful, always aware. That's how we stay safe, and that's how we stay free." Samuel nodded, satisfied with the answer, returning to his fort, his imagination turning a simple living room into a castle of adventure and safety. The legal aftermath had long since concluded. Claudia Mercer was behind bars, her empire dismantled, every associate accounted for. Michael and Sabrina served their sentences stripped of wealth. Their names now whispers in court records rather than in family conversations. I did not rejoice in their downfall. My triumph was quieter, steadier. It was in Samuel's eyes, in the home we had built, in the knowledge that the boy had once been endangered now lived in safety, surrounded by love, and free from fear. I had also reconnected with those who had truly mattered in my life. Friends, neighbors, and a few distant relatives who had shown kindness through years of silence returned, bringing warmth and stability. Frank became more than a protector. He became family, a constant presence and mentor to Samuel. Laura continued her work as our investigator and advisor, but in quieter moments, she laughed and played with Samuel, teaching him the thrill of discovery without danger, the joy of curiosity without fear. One winter evening, as snow fell softly outside, I tucked Samuel into bed. The room smelled of pine, books, and the faint trace of cocoa from the small heater in the corner. "Mommy," he whispered sleepily, "do you think people can change?" I paused, stroking his "Some do, Samuel. But change takes courage, honesty, and a willingness to face what you've done. And even when people can't change, you can choose to be brave, to protect, and to love. That's the choice that matters." He smiled, drifting into sleep, and I stayed beside him for a while longer, thinking of everything we had endured, everything we had overcome, and everything that lay ahead. In those quiet moments, I reflected on the river, the betrayal, the fake funeral, and the darkness that had once surrounded me. I had survived because I refused to surrender, because I chose to fight not for revenge, but for life, for Samuel, and for the future. I had rebuilt my home, my family, and my sense of self. And I understood finally, with a clarity born of suffering and triumph, that family is not defined by blood, wealth, or ambition. Family is defined by love, protection, trust, and the choices we make every single day. I walked through the house one evening, hands trailing along walls once shadowed by betrayal, now bright with sunlight filtering through curtains. Samuel laughed in the distance, running toward the garden, chasing the first butterflies of spring. I felt a swell of gratitude. Not for the wealth Thomas and I had built, not for the empire that had been fought over, but for life itself, for the chance to witness innocence, to nurture love, and to know that the river had not claimed me. My survival had meaning. My actions had purpose, and Samuel's life was the proof. Sometimes, when the past whispered in memories of betrayal and danger, I would sit by lair that had nearly ended me. The water now glimmered peacefully, reflecting sunlight rather than menace. I thought of Michael, Sabrina, and Mercer, and I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction, not revenge, not malice. Just justice realized. I had been pushed into the depths, nearly drowned by the hands of those I loved, yet I had surfaced, stronger, wiser, and fiercely alive. And most importantly, I had built something that no one could take away. Samuel, bright-eyed, laughing, curious, safe, and loved. A life reclaimed, a future secured. I realized, with a deep, unshakable certainty, that survival was not just about enduring the worst. It was about creating the best. And in Samuel's smile, in the warmth of our home, in the life we had forged from betrayal and danger, I knew we had truly survived. No river, no betrayal, no greed could touch us again. Our lives, bound by choice, courage, and love, were ours and ours alone.